I am 63 years old. My hands are rough. My back hurts every morning when I wake up. My hair turned white before I even noticed. And for most of my life, I did not care about any of that because I had a family, a son, a daughter-in-law, grandchildren, a home that I built brick by brick with my own hands and my own sweat. I thought that was enough. I thought love was enough. But on one Sunday, one single Sunday, I learned something that broke my heart in a way that no doctor could ever fix. My daughter-in-law looked me in the eyes and said, "This day is not for you. Don't embarrass this family." And my son, my own son, said nothing. He just looked away. I did not cry. I did not shout. I did not break a single thing. I simply went upstairs, packed a small bag, and I left. What happened 1 week later, I never expected, not in 1,000 years. So please, sit down. Because this story is not just mine. This story belongs to every father, every mother, every quiet person who ever gave everything and received nothing in return. Let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Gerald Thompson. I was born in a small town in Ohio. My father was a carpenter. My mother washed other people's clothes to feed us. We were poor, genuinely poor, but we were never hungry for love. My parents made sure of that. I grew up knowing the value of hard work. I knew that nothing in this world comes for free, and I carried that lesson with me every single day of my life. When I was 24, I married a woman named Carol. She was gentle. She was smart. She had a laugh that could fill up any room. We were not rich. We had almost nothing when we started. But we had each other, and in those early years, that truly felt like everything. We had one son. We named him Daniel. Daniel was the center of our world. I worked double shifts at the manufacturing plant for 12 years, so Daniel could go to a good school. Carol took in sewing work from neighbors, so we could buy him new shoes every semester. When Daniel was accepted into college, a real 4-year university, Carol and I stood in the kitchen and cried like two children. Happy tears, proud tears. We had done something right. We had raised a good boy. Or at least, we thought we had. Daniel graduated, got a good job, met a woman named Melissa at work. They dated for 2 years, then got married. The wedding was beautiful. I paid for most of it. I did not mind. He was my son. She would be my daughter. I was happy. Melissa was different from us. Her family had money. Not extraordinary wealth, but comfortable money. Nice cars. Big house. Private school for her younger siblings. She had grown up in a world where appearances mattered more than almost anything else. I noticed this early, but I told myself, she loves Daniel. Daniel loves her. That is what matters. And for a few years, things were fine. They had 2 children, a boy named Lucas and a girl named Emma. I loved those grandchildren with everything inside me. Every Sunday, I would drive to their house, bring cookies Carol baked, sit on the living room floor, and build blocks with Lucas and listen to Emma. Those Sunday afternoons were the best part of my week. Then Carol got sick. Carol was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's when she was 61. The first year was manageable. She forgot small things. Keys, names of TV shows, what she had eaten for lunch. I told myself it was just age. I told myself she was fine. But by the second year, it was undeniable. She forgot where she had put the stove knob. She forgot the names of neighbors she had known for 30 years. One evening, she looked at me across the dinner table and asked very quietly, "I'm sorry, what is your name?" Again. I smiled. I told her. And then I went to the bathroom and stood there for 10 minutes with my hand over my mouth, so she would not hear me cry. I became Carol's full-time caregiver. I cooked for her, helped her bathe, took her to every doctor appointment, sat beside her bed when she had bad nights. I read to her from the books she used to love. Sometimes she remembered them. Sometimes she looked at the pages like she was seeing words for the first time. I did not complain. I did not ask Daniel to help more than he could. He had a job. He had children. He had a life. I understood. But I noticed the Sunday visits became less frequent. Then they stopped almost completely. Melissa started saying things like, "It's so hard to bring the kids when Carol is, like that. It upsets them." I understood. I said nothing. Then Carol passed away. It was a Tuesday morning in March. Peaceful. She was in her own bed. I was holding her hand. She looked at me in the last hour and she said, "And I will never forget this for as long as I live." She said, "Gerald, I remember everything. I always did, in here." She touched her chest, and then she was gone. I buried her in the town where she was born. Daniel came to the funeral. Melissa came. The grandchildren came. It was a quiet, dignified service, just the way Carol would have wanted. After the funeral, Daniel sat with me for an hour. He held my hand. He said, "Dad, you don't have to stay in that house alone. Come live with us." I looked at my son. I saw the boy I had raised. The boy I had worked double shifts for. The boy whose school shoes I had paid for with overtime money. I said yes. I should not have said yes. I sold the house Carol and I had shared for 31 years. I did not keep much. Some photographs. Carol's favorite blue cardigan that still smelled faintly of her perfume. My tools from the garage. A box of letters we had written to each other when we were young and could not afford phone calls. I moved into Daniel and Melissa's house in September. The guest room was nice. Clean. A window facing the backyard where Lucas and Emma played. I told myself, this is a new chapter. This is not an ending. This is just different. The first few weeks were okay. I helped around the house. I fixed the leaky faucet in the downstairs bathroom that Daniel had been ignoring for months. I repaired the back fence. I helped Emma with her reading homework every evening. Lucas and I spent Saturday mornings watching old cartoons together. Those moments were genuine, warm, real. But I started to feel something I could not quite name. A coldness. Not from Daniel, not directly, but from Melissa. Small things at first. When her friends came over for dinner, I was told, gently but clearly, to maybe stay in your room tonight, Gerald. It's just a girl's thing. When her parents visited, I noticed I was never introduced properly. I was mentioned as Daniel's father, with a kind of vague wave, the way you might mention a piece of furniture that has been there so long you no longer really see it. When I cooked a big pot of vegetable soup one afternoon, the same recipe Carol had made for decades, Melissa came into the kitchen and looked at the pot and said, "Oh, we don't really eat that kind of food anymore, Gerald. The kids have sensitive stomachs." I said nothing. I put the soup in containers and brought it to the neighbors. Weeks passed, then months. I learned to stay quiet. I learned to take up less space. I ate early or ate late, depending on what was happening in the house. I tried not to be in the living room when Melissa had calls to make. I tried not to walk too loudly in the mornings because Melissa said the sound of my footsteps woke her up. I was living in that house like a ghost. And Daniel, my Daniel, he saw it all, and he said nothing. That silence from my son hurt more than anything Melissa ever said. It was a Friday evening when Daniel came to find me in my room. I was sitting by the window reading. He knocked on the door frame. He always knocked, which I appreciated, and he came in and sat on the edge of the bed. "Dad," he said, "Melissa's mother is coming this Sunday. The whole family is gathering. Her brothers, her sisters, her aunts. It's sort of a big deal." I put down my book. "That sounds nice," I said. "Do you want me to help prepare something?" Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. He had a habit of doing that when he was uncomfortable. He had done it since he was a teenager. "Actually, Dad, Melissa thinks it might be better if you kind of stay low-key this Sunday." I looked at my son. "Stay low-key," I repeated. "Yeah, you know how her family is. They're particular. And Melissa just wants everything to go smoothly." I nodded slowly. "Okay, Daniel, I understand." He looked relieved. He patted my knee once and left. I sat there for a long time after he walked out. Stay low-key. I turned those words over in my mind. I was not sure exactly what they meant. Perhaps I would eat in my room. Perhaps I would simply stay upstairs. I told myself, it is one afternoon, one Sunday. You can give your daughter-in-law one Sunday without making it difficult. I decided I would be gracious. I would stay out of sight. No trouble. No embarrassment. I was wrong about what stay low-key would actually mean. Sunday morning arrived bright and warm. I could hear activity downstairs early. Melissa on the phone, delivery people at the door, the children being reminded to clean their rooms. It sounded like a significant event was being prepared. I dressed carefully. I put on my good shirt, the blue one Carol had bought me for our last anniversary. I combed my hair. I did not want to cause any problems. I simply wanted to exist quietly in that house, the way I had been doing for months. I came downstairs at 10 in the morning to make myself a cup of coffee. Melissa was in the kitchen arranging flowers in a large vase. She looked up when I walked in. Her expression shifted, just slightly. The way a person's face shifts when they see something they were not expecting. "Gerald," she said, "I thought we talked about today." "I'm just getting coffee," I said. "The caterers are coming at noon," she said, as if that explained everything. "And the family arrives at 1, so we'll need the kitchen clear from 11 onward." "Of course," I said. I made my coffee quickly and went back upstairs. I sat in my room. At 1 o'clock, I heard cars arriving, voices, laughter, the sounds of a large family assembling. I could hear Melissa's mother, a sharp, bright voice, greeting everyone. I could hear the children running. Daniel laughing at someone's joke. It sounded like a party. I stayed in my room. I read. I listened to the radio softly. I told myself, this is fine. They need this space. You are being respectful. At 2 o'clock, there was a knock on my door. It was Emma, my granddaughter. She was 6 years old, and she had her mother's dark hair and Carol's exact smile, which always made my heart squeeze a little. "Grandpa," she said, "why aren't you coming down? We're eating soon." I looked at her little face and I said, "I'll be down in a moment, sweetheart." She ran back downstairs. I straightened my shirt. I went downstairs. The dining room table was full. Extended family sat everywhere. Melissa's mother at one end, her brothers, sisters-in-law, aunts. 2 extra folding tables had been set up in the living room for the overflow. The food smelled wonderful. The energy was warm. I stood in the doorway. Melissa saw me first. She walked over quickly, not to welcome me. I understood immediately. Her voice was low, controlled, but the look in her eyes was not. "Gerald," she said quietly, "what are you doing down here?" "Emma said you were eating soon," I said. I told Daniel to tell you," she said. "This table, this is for my family. This Sunday is about my mother. She came a long way and this is her day." I looked at her. "I understand. I can sit at one of the side tables." "No." Her voice did not rise, but it hardened. I had genuinely believed, right up until that Sunday afternoon, that things would get better, that Daniel would find his voice, that the family would become something real. But I had kept the house, just in case. I called a taxi from the end of the street. I gave the driver the address. And 41 minutes later, I stood in front of a small white house with a blue front door and an oak tree in the yard. I found the spare key under the mat where the contractor had left it. I opened the door. I walked inside. The second bedroom had been set up as a small study. The smell of fresh paint and clean wood filled every room. I set my bag down on the kitchen counter. I stood in the silence. And then I sat down on the floor, just the floor, because there was no furniture yet. And I cried for the first time since Carol had died. Not because I was broken, but because I was finally, somewhere that was mine. I lived quietly in that small house for the week that followed. I slept on an air mattress the first 2 nights. Then I drove to a second-hand furniture store and bought a proper bed frame, a kitchen table, 2 chairs, and a reading lamp. Nothing expensive, everything comfortable. I called 2 old friends that week, men I had worked with at the plant for years, men I had not spoken to enough during the years of caring for Carol and then living in Daniel's shadow. They were glad to hear from me. One of them, a man named Robert, came over on Wednesday and we sat in the bare kitchen with cups of coffee and talked for 3 hours about everything and nothing, the way old friends do. I planted something in the backyard, just a small herb garden along the fence. Rosemary and basil and mint, the kind of plants Carol always kept in her kitchen window. I read books in the evenings, real books, without worrying about whether my reading lamp was disturbing someone. I cooked proper meals, the vegetable soup, a slow pot roast on Thursday, eggs and toast every morning without rushing. I did not call Daniel. I want to be clear about that. I did not call to punish him. I did not call because I genuinely needed this silence. I needed to sit with what had happened and understand it fully before I spoke to anyone. On the 4th day, I received a text message from Emma. "Grandpa, where are you? Mommy said you went on a trip. When are you coming back?" I read it 3 times. I typed back, "I am okay, sweetheart. I am somewhere safe. I love you very much." She sent back a drawing. An actual drawing. She had taken a photo of it. A man with white hair standing under a big tree. Below it, in 6-year-old handwriting, she had written, "Grandpa and his tree." I printed that drawing. I taped it to the kitchen wall. It was the evening of the 7th day. I was sitting in the backyard, watching the sun go down behind the oak tree. The air smelled like the rosemary I had planted. There was a cup of tea in my hand. Everything was very still, very peaceful. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. Daniel. I let it ring twice. Not to be dramatic. I simply needed to prepare myself, I answered. Dad. His voice was different. Something in it had changed. A tightness I had never heard before. Or maybe I had heard it before and simply not recognized it. Hello, Daniel, I said. Dad, where are you? Are you okay? We've been, Melissa has been. Where did you go? I waited a moment before I answered. I'm somewhere safe, I said. How are the children? The children are fine, Dad. But where are you? You left. Without saying anything. Without leaving a note. We didn't even notice until Monday morning when Melissa went to bring you breakfast, and the room was empty. Monday morning. He had not noticed until Monday morning. I had left on Sunday afternoon. I said nothing about that. I'm fine, Daniel, I said. Dad, can you tell me where you are? Are you in a motel? Do you need money? I don't need money, I said gently. I have everything I need. A pause. Dad, about Sunday. I know that, Melissa. Daniel, I said. I would like to talk, but not tonight. I'm not ready tonight. Call me in a few days. Dad, I love you, son. I hung up. I sat in the quiet backyard until the stars came out. Then I went inside and went to sleep. 3 days later, it was Melissa who called. Something cracked open. Melissa, I said, is everyone all right? Are the children okay? The children are fine, she said. Gerald, I need to tell you something. And I need you to listen. I'm listening. I said, a long breath. Then, my mother talked to me. I waited. She saw what happened on Sunday. She watched me talk to you in the hallway. She saw you go back upstairs. She saw you leave. She was looking out the window and she saw you walk out with your bag. I said nothing. She didn't say anything to me on Sunday or Monday. But then on Tuesday she called me. Melissa paused. She told me that I reminded her of her own sister, that her sister had done something similar, pushed away her mother-in-law years ago, made her feel unwanted in the home, and that her sister had regretted it for 20 years. Her sister's mother-in-law died in a care home 3 years later alone, and her sister still cried about it. The line was quiet for a moment. Gerald, I need you to know that I am. Her voice broke. She actually broke. I'm so sorry for what I said. It was wrong. It was cruel. You have never been anything but kind in our house. You fixed things and helped with the children and never asked for anything. And I treated you like you were in the way. I sat very still. My mother asked me something that I haven't been able to stop thinking about, Melissa continued. She asked me, she said, Melissa, do you know what that man gave up to be in your house? And I said, I knew he sold his house. And she said, no, I mean what he gave up inside himself. Every day, to stay quiet, to stay out of the way, to love your children and not ask for anything back. She said, do you know how much strength that takes? I felt the back of my throat tighten. And I didn't know, Gerald. I honestly didn't. I was so worried about appearances and what my family would think and whether things would look a certain way. I was selfish. I was so selfish. She was crying now. I don't expect you to come back, she said. I don't deserve that, but I needed you to hear me say it. I am sorry. I am deeply, truly sorry. I sat with her words for a long moment. Then I said, and I meant every word, Melissa, I accept your apology. A sound from her, relief and grief mixed together. But I need you to hear something from me, I said, not as an accusation, just as a truth. Okay, she whispered. I never wanted to be in your way, I said. I never wanted to make your life harder. When I moved in, I knew it was a change. I knew it was an adjustment for everyone. I tried to be invisible because I thought that was what you needed from me. Gerald, let me finish, please. She was quiet. I worked for 40 years so that my son could have a life I never had. I sat by his mother's bedside for 2 years while she forgot who I was, while she forgot her own name. And I held her hand every single night. And when she died, the only thing that kept me standing was the idea that I still had a family, that there was still a table I could come home to. My voice was steady. I had had 10 days to think about this. When you told me I could not sit at that table, Melissa, not the table that hurt me, understand that. A table is wood. A table is wood. I don't care about a table. Melissa and I had 2 more difficult conversations over the following weeks. They were honest conversations, sometimes uncomfortable. I told her things I had kept silent for months. She told me things about her own fear of being judged by her family, her need for control, the pressure she put on herself. I did not excuse what she had done, but I began to understand it. Understand it. Understanding is not the same as forgetting, but it is the beginning of healing. Emma and Lucas started coming to my house on Saturday mornings. I made pancakes. We planted more things in the garden. Lucas chose tomatoes. Emma chose sunflowers. By the end of the summer, there were sunflowers against the back fence taller than either of the children. We started having Sunday dinners at my house. Not every Sunday, but enough Sundays that it became something real. Something we looked forward to. I cooked. Daniel brought bread and wine. Melissa brought a dessert. Always a dessert, always different. The children set the table. We sat together, all of us, at the same table. The first time we did this, I stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment before I sat down, and I looked at all of them. My son, my grandchildren, the woman who had once told me I was not welcome, sitting at my table, in my home, waiting for me to take my seat at the head of it. I thought about Carol. I thought about what she would have said if she could have seen that moment. I think she would have said, "Well, Gerald, you stubborn old man, you did it." I sat down. I said grace. We ate. I am going to speak directly to you now, not as a storyteller. As a man who has lived this, if you have an old parent in your home, a mother, a father, a grandparent, I want to ask you something, not to make you feel guilty, but to make you stop and truly think. When did you last ask them how they were doing? Not how are you, the way we say when we pass someone in the hallway, but really, truly, how are you? And what do you need? And is there something you have been too quiet to ask for? Old people are often quiet. They have learned that the world does not always want to hear their answers to that question. They shrink. They take up less space. They convince themselves that they are a burden when they are not, when they have never been a burden, when they are, in fact, the very people who built everything you are now standing on. My father carried wood for 30 years so I could be warm. My mother washed other people's clothes so I could have shoes. I worked double shifts so Daniel could go to college. None of us ever calculated that debt. None of us ever presented a bill. Because love doesn't work like that. But respect, that is not too much to ask for. A seat at the table, that is not too much to ask. I did not leave Daniel's house because I was angry at Melissa. I left because I understood something in that moment that I had been too afraid to admit. You cannot love yourself into someone else's home. A home is not just a roof and walls. A home is the feeling of belonging, the certainty that you are wanted, the knowledge that if you came downstairs right now, someone would be glad to see you. I had not felt that in 11 months. In the moment I walked out, the moment I crossed that threshold with my bag in my hand, I began to feel it again, because I was walking toward myself. That is the thing they never tell you about self-respect. It is not loud. It does not announce itself. It does not fight or argue or demand recognition. Self-respect is very quiet. It simply knows when to walk out the door. And something extraordinary happens when you walk out that door with your dignity intact. The people who needed you to be small suddenly see how large you actually were. The space you occupied, the space you were quietly filling with your patience and your labor and your love, becomes visible only when it is empty. Melissa's mother understood this. She had lived long enough to see it happen to someone she loved, and she sat her daughter down and said, "Do you know what that man gave up inside himself every day to stay quiet?" That question changed everything, because that is the question we forget to ask. We see the old man sitting quietly in the corner, and we think, he is fine, he is easy, he doesn't ask for much. We do not think, what is the cost of all that quiet? What has he swallowed every day to stay this still? We do not ask until he is gone. And then we ask, but it is too late, and the asking feels like grief. I am 63 years old. I live in a small white house with a blue front door and an oak tree in the yard. I have a herb garden along the back fence. I have an Emma drawing tape to my kitchen wall. So I have a table where most Sundays my family sits and eats and talks. I am not rich. My back still hurts in the morning. My hair is still white, but I am home. And I want to say one last thing to every parent, every grandparent, every quiet person who has ever made themselves smaller to fit into someone else's idea of what space you deserve. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to sit at the table. You built the table. You built the table. Do not let anyone send you upstairs. Do not let anyone make you a ghost in a house you helped make possible. And if they do, if they say the words that break something quiet and permanent inside your chest, then do what I did. Pack slowly, walk out with your dignity, and go find your oak tree. Because it is waiting for you. It was always waiting for you. In the end, we do not regret the things we did not have. We regret the people we did not see, until they were gone. If this story moved you, if it made you think of someone you love, please share it with them. You never know whose day it might change. And if you are new here, consider subscribing. We tell stories like this every week. Stories about real life, real love, real lessons. Because sometimes the most important things we learn come not from books, but from the quiet moments we almost missed.